I'm Teresa Bienken, CEO of National Speakers Bureau Canada and Global Speakers Agency. We're one of the original speakers bureaus in North America, celebrating 50 years of service to event professionals. NSB has the key. We help you unlock possibility with your teams and your personal and professional development by bringing you expert speakers and thought leaders for your own conferences and events. I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker at our Engage Unlock Possibility webinar series. Dr. Brynn Winegard is someone we've worked with for a number of years, and she's one of the kindest, smartest, most accessible and generous speakers that we work with, and you'll see why in this webinar. Dr. Brynn Winegard is a Harvard-trained, multiple award-winning professor and advisor in applied neuroscience and positive psychology for professionals. And she has a brand new book and speaking topic with her latest research. It's The Working Brain on How to Optimize Your Workday Performance. From the latest insights in neuroscience to her merit-based framework, Dr. Brynn equips you with tools to unlock your full potential and make 2025 your most productive, balanced, and successful year yet. Dr. Brynn does work extensively with leading institutions, providing cutting-edge, brain-based insights into employee engagement, wellness. We've booked her for leadership development, high performance teams, and organizational effectiveness. We're here to help you optimize 2025. Welcome, Brynn.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Teresa. Such an honor and a pleasure to be here, the first of the year. Today we are talking about the new year, new you, best career year yet. Using insights from my new book, I'm so pleased to be able to offer based on all my latest research. I'm going to go through a lot of what's in the book. Okay, so, the overview of kind of, bird's eye view of everything that's included, part 1, part 2, part 3. Really, part 1 is dispelling myths and misconceptions. Part 2 is all about the Ultradian rhythm of the brain and how to organize your workday. And then part 3 is my proprietary merit framework, which stands for move, eat, rest, interact, and think. And so we'll go through all of that today, but this is really an honor to be able to present with you. So thank you, NSB, for having me. Without further ado, let me ask you this question. Are you using only 10% of your brain? Is this true or is this false? What's funny is most people in my audiences and people because of corporate lore, because of popular mainstream media, because of what we've all heard, most people will say this is true. In actual fact, this is false. Okay, so we are actually only using 100% of our brain, not 10%, but only about 1% of it we think is conscious. We used to believe that about 10% was conscious. And so we think there's a lot of ways that this myth has pervaded, a lot of reasons, but this is one of them, is that basically you are not using 10%, you are using maybe 1% consciously, and the rest is subconscious. And so actually you're using every single neuron. I sometimes refer to this as neuronal FOMO, fear of missing out. Every neuron in your brain needs an impulse about every 6 hours in order to be alive, to stay alive. So it's like survival of the fittest in there, in your brain as well. So you're using 100% of your brain. Okay, this is good news for us. It does also change how we might think about our brain. I also have this question, another myth I like to bust. Body and brain follow something called the circadian rhythm. Is this true or is this false? Well, it's kind of a trick question because the answer is they both follow the circadian rhythm, but actually the brain follows its own rhythm called the ultradian rhythm. So this is in fact false because while the brain is following the circadian rhythm, it's also following the ultradian rhythm. The brain's ultradian rhythm is 4 stages, okay? So the arousal stage, your highest performance stage, the stress response phase, and then the ultradian healing response phase. Now, in the 1960s, when Nathaniel Kleitman first did his sleep research, we thought that this ultradian rhythm was about 90 minutes of kind of uptime, including arousal, high performance, stress, and then 20 minutes of downtime, something we call the ultradian healing response. Actually, what we find now is that this is likely shortened. What has shortened our ultradian cycle? So what you'll see here is that all of your uptime, the phases of climb, peak, and fall, all of these we think are something closer to 45 to 60 minutes in practice. So while theoretically you have 90 minutes of working attention, working time to be productive, actually we find in practice it's much shorter than that for things like distraction, for things like other obligations in your life, for other things like technology use. And so actually what many researchers have shown is that increased tech use, more tech use in your day and throughout your life actually decreases your working attention, your attention span, your ability for productivity, your ability to stay focused at any one time. So in practice, what we think is you have something closer to about 45 to 60 minutes of uptime, but you'll notice that the ultradian healing response, something I call in the book, the valley, actually is something closer to about 20 minutes. Okay. So you are, and still that's the same as in the original concept. So think about the idea that actually you have less uptime, but you require the same amount of recuperation, replenishment, and downtime. This also, of course, has ramification for how you might organize your day. You might look at your day and think of it like a series of sprints instead of a marathon. And those sprints may be chunked into hour or hour and 20-minute blocks, so that what you're doing is you're organizing your day according to how your brain actually is ebbing and flowing through its ultradian rhythm. Now, what I also did was take evidence from other research to show that when you experience stress, you actually flatten this cycle, okay? And you know this intuitively and implicitly to be true. When you have felt very stressed out, you have not been performing at your peak, but you are also feeling like you can't really replenish and recuperate and de-stress properly. And so what we see is that technology shortens the cycle and stress flattens the cycle so that you are less able to produce and be productive and have uptime, but you're also just not able to rest and replenish and recuperate and recover the same either. And so stress, technology, all types of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, these things all contribute to how your brain operates throughout your day. And these are the things that we need to try to mitigate using tools we have at our disposal. What I did was develop what I call the merit framework. It corresponds to many chapters in the book, but effectively the merit framework is predicated on the pillars of lifestyle, mind, body, preventative medicine. And I cherry picked some, and others are defined differently. But what this allows is that while they're not mutually exclusive, this is what we consider to be the collectively exhaustive subset of things you need to do or you can do in order that you actually have control over in order to improve your mental performance and your cognitive performance. So these are things you can control. You can control how you exercise and move. You can control what you put in your mouth. You can control your sleep patterns most of the time, your sleep hygiene most nights. You can control how you interact with others and how often. You can control what you think and the thoughts inside your head. Okay. And so for that reason, each of these is designed to be a lever at your disposal that you can typically control, whereas a lot of the world is not a thing. These are not things you can control, right? You can't control everything about the environment, everything about culture, everything about what's on the media, what's in the news, what other people do. You can't control those things, but you can control what you do to improve your own mental performance and cognitive performance as well, especially through the workday. Without further ado, let me go through what I'm going to show you very briefly is the structure also of the book, but it's the worst case, base case, and best case scenario for each of these 5 levers, okay? And so the worst case is what we would consider to be disequilibrium. It's damaging. It might cause dysfunction, disorder, disease, disaster. There is a base case scenario, something that most of us find ourselves in this scenario. This is the homeostatic scenario, where it's not going to thwart disorder, dysfunction, disease, disaster, but it will at least hope that we don't run into problems necessarily. Homeostasis is also the circumstance where you go back to the state you were in previously. So if you have a stressor or you have a really important task or a tough thing you're doing, what happens afterward is that you go back to how it was. There is a best case scenario, though. There is a way to move the needle even further. And we call that the best case scenario or allostasis. This is an ameliorating circumstance where you're actually promoting adaptation, coping. This actually helps to thwart disorder, dysfunction, disease, disaster. Okay, so this is our best case scenario. I'm going to go through each 3 for all of my 5 levers so that you kind of get a sense of where am I in each of these, and what can I do a bit better and differently in order to be able to create a better brain and to be better, mentally and cognitively. This is a fact that I often get asked this. Movement for mental or cognitive benefit, no pain, no gain. Is this true or is this false? The answer is that this too is false, okay? You do not need to go super hard, super challenging. You don't have to go super intense. In fact, sometimes that can backfire when we talk about physical movement. In fact, what I prefer is people who are constantly active in little ways throughout the day. Something we call non-exercise activity thermogenesis, NEAT, N-E-A-T, NEAT, actually increases your basal metabolic rate, some neuromotor functioning. But the idea is that all day long, you're kind of like fidgeting, okay? You're not going too hard, too much in the gym and then hurting yourself. Those are what I call my sedentary Spartans, okay? Sporadic sedentary Spartans. They are not the ideal scenario. This is worst case scenario. This is a person who is mostly sedentary. Sometimes we see them suddenly become very active, suddenly become overactive, really, especially New Year's resolutions right around this time of year. They will then launch themselves into the gym, go too hard, too fast, and they will end up hurting themselves if they do that at all. Very often they decide against it. And of course, this leads to disorder, dysfunction, disease. We don't want to do this. We all know this scenario, not ideal for us. Now, most of us find ourselves in what we call the base case scenario, which is, 3 to 5 days a week. We are doing activity. We are working out. We do make time for it. It is part of our, our weekly cycle. Sometimes in most days, we're doing something. Now, this base case homeostatic scenario is good. Okay, we want this. We're better than nothing. What these people often struggle with are two things. And this is most of us, again, is that their workouts are very repetitive. So they do risk injury in other areas. So they're not doing the requisite amount of cardiovascular plus strength training plus the mobility, stability, neuromotor activities that we would look for. And this is typically people who also will skimp on the stretching, stability, flexibility. So they'll do their run in the morning, have a very quick light stretch, if any, and then go off to work. And so while that's not terrible, movement's great. Movement is magic for the brain. What we are looking for and what we can hope for is to move the needle a little bit further into the ideal circumstance. This is the best case allostatic circumstance where you aren't just working out 5 days a week. Maybe there are no days that you're not active somehow. Okay, that's ideal too, is that you're never working out so hard that you can't return to some activity the next day. Okay, that's important, is that on the one hand, you have some lactic acid, you're pushing yourself, you're challenging yourself, but you're not so active that you can't do it the next day. You can't do something the next day. Now, these people, as an example, are evidence of best case scenario. They're doing 3 things that are really important for allostatic best practice movement. Here is what it is. 1, they are doing some amount of their exercise every week socially. So they include other people in their physical activity and in their routines. And what that allows is that they get some oxytocin, they're interacting, they have community built around their exercise that increases things like accountability. They also are using some of their exercise time to go outside and be in nature. We call that green exercise. It actually increases some other neurochemistry, other things that happen in your brain, in your body that are really beneficial that you can't get when you're just in the gym every workout. Okay, so you want to have some people involved so that there's more accountability and it's more fun. You do want to go outside, do that green exercise sometime during the week. There's a third thing these people are doing that's ideal, and that's that they have a goal to run a distance or a race. So there's actually something that they are going toward, that they are, organizing themselves to do, that they then have to accomplish. What that allows when you have a goal, it means that you'll be a little more consistent typically, because you have that race coming up. You have to run that distance consistently. And so you don't just get to sort of willy-nilly pick it up and put it down. So it increases things like your commitment and your consistency when you have a goal that you're going toward, a goal that you're trying to reach physically. So you're outside, you're with people, you actually have something you're trying to accomplish, something that you're training toward, that will increase your physical movement and how good it is then for you mentally and for you cognitively. Now we move on to eat. I see so many questions about this, about nutrition for brain health. One of the main ones for eating for cognitive benefit or mental benefit is, I count my macros, so I'm all set. This is good. I love it when people count some macros, know basically of the macros, protein, carbohydrates, fat, of the macros, they know what's in their food. That's important. But actually, it's not enough. You're starting to see a bit of a theme here. This is also false. Counting your macros is not enough for your cognitive and mental wellness. I also want you to do something else, but I'll tell you in a sec. Of course, I don't want you to have to always, cheat days are fine. Everyone has them. Not everyone's perfect in their nutrition or dietary choices. But we do know that when you get stressed or the going gets rough, you will naturally tend toward things that are high in fat, salt, sugar, not ideal for you. We also know that processed foods, ultra processed foods, terrible for you in other ways, partly because many of the inclusions and additives are actually not nutritional. They're not food. In very many cases, they're toxic or poison. So we do want to try to avoid not only bad foods, right? Ultra processed foods. Actually, the less you eat out, the better off you are. The healthier you are, the better your nutritional choices will be, and the better your nutritional absorption is internal, like in your gut. So this is worst case. We all know, just try not to choose these foods. What is the base case? Typically, it's people who are counting macros. They have some good idea of their calorie content each day, some good idea of what they've eaten in terms of their carb, protein, fat breakdown. You've seen all types of different shapes of this in terms of the breakdown, right? The proportion for each. Many diets advocate for low carb. Villainizing one macronutrient over another is very harmful for the brain because the brain needs all three of these things, as does your body. But your brain actually works on the glucose and glycogen in your bloodstream. That's how you can think it needs that as fuel in order to function. So you can't forego all carbs in your diet. It's just a matter of getting the right ones, of getting, the vegetables and the fruits and the proper grains that will help with your, evening out your blood sugar and helping you with the carbohydrates that need to be in that bloodstream in order for you to think and to do the magic you do every day. You do want to eat a ton more protein than we used to think. Protein is just so good for every process in the body and every physical component of the body and brain, of course. And then fat, if we looked at the brain through the lens of what it's made up of, it's made up of fats and proteins and water, tons of water. So you want to eat what you are, not just you are what you eat. You want to eat what you are. And so drinking more water, making sure you're getting those healthy fats in, making sure you're getting a ton of protein at every meal, not just once a day, very important components. So this is base case. Most people are here. We kind of know, what do I need to eat? How many calories should I be eating for my body mass? We kind of get a good sense of what that should be. Now, here's best case scenario. Best case scenario is when you're eating for what we call nutrient density. And in this case, it's not counting your macros, it's counting your micros. Count your micronutrient density. And actually, you don't need to quantify it. You just need to know that you're getting enough vitamins and minerals every day at every meal, and preferably in every food source. Vitamins and minerals are actually colorful to the human eye. So when someone asks me, well, how do I know if something is micronutrient dense? It's typically quite colorful. That's one of the best ways you can tell. Okay, so it'll grow on the ground from a tree. It's something God made, and it is typically colorful and fairly pretty, basically. It basically should look appetitive to put on your plate and to have, to eat and put in your mouth. And so the more colorful your food is, we sometimes say eat the rainbow, the more colorful your food is, the better and more likely it is that you are getting micronutrient density, the vitamins and minerals that you need. Okay, here's the other thing. When you eat for micronutrient density, you actually also likely figure out the macros all by yourself, because when food is real and there are real vitamins and real minerals that your body needs to process, your gut needs to absorb, it will slow you down and say, enough, I'm satiated, don't eat anymore, I'm busy with what I've been given. And for that reason too, we find that when you eat for micronutrient density, both macros, weight loss, satiety, GLP, all of these things, they figure themselves out because your body says, hang on, I have enough of what I need and not too much and not too little. Thank you for that. Let me process it. And so you feel satiated, you walk away, you don't feel hungry in an hour, you feel like you've done the right nutritional work. So there's lots more to say, but we have to move on in the interest of time. In the book, I talk about rest, which is breaks, time each day that you're actually doing something that isn't work. I also talk about, of course, sleep. You cannot cheat your sleep. Sleep is so important for the human brain. One of the questions I often ask, and one of the major myths about human, sleep is what's happening in there. Are we, during sleep, learning, working, and changing, or are we resting, recuperating, and relaxing? The human perception is B, that we are resting, recuperating, and relaxing. And while some of that's true for the body, actually, for the brain, a lot is happening in there. This is often when the brain does its heaviest lifting, does its hardest work. This is when your brain is actually rewiring itself, it's cleaning itself, it's clearing out toxins, it's fixing some neural networks, it's rewiring others. And so this is happening all while you're sleeping, which is why it's so important to get enough sleep. Well, what's the worst case scenario? We all know. It's the people who are having too much late night blue light activity, right? That blue light interrupts the pineal gland, your ability to produce melatonin, your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. So we don't love that. It also is people who don't necessarily have a set bedtime or don't stick to one. They're typically working. They often won't be sleeping with technology. They'll often let pets and partners and kids interrupt their sleep. They maybe haven't given a lot of thought to their sleeping environment or to their bedding, that type of thing. So what we do want to do, where most of us live, is again in this homeostatic base case scenario where, they've got that natural linens, they thought about the room and environment and the quality of the mattress, they have a set bedtime. Do they stick to it? They're doing the best job they can kind of every day, getting enough sleep. They understand the importance thereof. Now, these people typically do need an alarm clock to wake up, okay? That's fine, but there's a better case scenario. The best case scenario is one where no alarm clock is required because you've gotten enough cycles, you sleep up, you wake up naturally. So you've slept adequately, you wake up naturally, you have all the energy you need for the day. How do you ensure this? How do you get up in time? Because the day waits for no one. How do you get up in time? You go to bed earlier. So these people are typically very rigid about their bedtime. They're typically very regimented about their sleep environment. They have those blackout blinds. They make sure they have natural fibers that they're sleeping on so that they don't absorb microplastics during their sleep. They make sure there's no heavy dyes on their bed linens. They're making sure that the room is nice and cool, that kids, pets, partners don't interrupt them, technology away from their head. And they're getting enough of those cycles in, 90-minute cycles of sleep, that they're probably going through 4 to 6 of them. And they are sleeping for 7 to 9 hours a night, sometimes a little bit more. And that really allows them that they are wakened up and they have all the energy they need at a good early hour in the day. The only way to ensure you're going through all those cycles is to go to bed earlier, okay? And to go to bed earlier requires a lot of planning. These people are regimented about that. They plan to go to bed and they make it a priority every single night. That's our best case scenario. Another thing I get asked about a lot these days is going back to the office. Is interacting? How important is it? I'm here to tell you that it is very important. So one of the things that often also gets missed or is a myth or misconception, I'll ask you this question. My neural functioning and chemistry is my own. It doesn't affect others and vice versa. Here you are getting the theme. This is false. Your neural functioning and chemistry is affected by the people that you interact with in person, not necessarily through video, on camera, over the telephone, a little bit, but actually it works much better in person physically. And so human interaction is so important for you as an actor, as a worker, as a person in the world. And so what you want to do, because we know that the brain is just so highly social, what you want to do is make sure that you're not in the worst case scenario. These people, they're online, they're on their phone, they're scrolling by the hour, they rather text, they don't even like telephone calls, and they certainly do not prioritize in-person interactions. This is what we often advise our kids not to do, right? Is to stay in a closed, dark room with just technology as their friend. Most of us live kind of in this semi-base case homeostatic scenario where we will have friends we interact with, we will go to work sometimes. We will, though, have quite the activity on social media. We often prefer text to telephone. All these types of, activities are not ideal. There is an ideal circumstance, and it's one where we are interacting with people in person as much as humanly possible. So really prioritizing that in-person component. Now that's true in your life, but it's also definitely true within the organization and at work. And so we know that people who see others at work working on similar things, who interact with more people, have more in-person meetings, they both feel more socially supported, and we see decrements in mental health problems, and we see better mental health and wellness. Those metrics, we see those go up. Even if, this is the funny thing, even if you don't like the people that you necessarily work with, just the idea that they're there and they're all, pushing in the same direction and they're all doing something similar is actually something that is really helpful, because our brains really require physical evidence of our social environment, of our social status, of our social support, and of our situation in the world. So the more that you can prioritize, you don't have to go 5 days a week, but the more you can prioritize actually going into the office sometimes, that would be really helpful. Because it actually does help how your neurochemistry works, how your brain works, how happy you feel, how socially supported you feel. It's very important. So I know right now some organizations calling people back to work, and there's been some pushback, but actually as the employee, as the worker, as the individual, there is a dangling carrot for you in going back to the office, at least some days a week, seeing some of your colleagues, some of your workmates. It's very helpful for your mental wellness and for your cognitive performance, including things like how you learn, how creative you are, all of that. Now, finally, where I focused in the book as well, in that merit framework, is the consideration for how we would have an allostatic mindset, how we control the thoughts we have, our internal world, the thoughts inside our head. Worst case scenario is what we call fixed or fragile thinking, fixed or fragile mindsets. We don't want to have that, right? You probably are familiar with the Carol Dweck's work of fixed versus growth mindset. Lots of people talking about growth mindset. Growth mindset's great. It's a base case. It's homeostatic, sometimes called a resiliency mindset. You want to be resilient. But as you remember from the beginning, homeostasis is really the circumstance where you stay the same. After you've come through a difficulty, challenge, strife, stress, you stay the same. You're not better. You're the same. And so there is a best case scenario, the allostatic scenario, where you're developing a mindset for anti-fragility. And that is the following. So we remember we don't, fixed in growth, that's been historically everything we knew about mindset that we talked about corporately. We can actually move even further with the help of Taleb. Taleb said that effectively there is this fixed, fragile worst case scenario. There's what he called the robust or resilient base case scenario. And then there's this best case scenario of anti-fragility. And while he was talking about markets and trading and business, actually we can adopt a lot of the key insights from his work for the human brain and for human mindset. Of course, here's a quote from Taleb that says, the resilient, like a resilient mindset, resists shocks and stays the same. The anti-fragile gets better. And so this is the allostatic best case scenario where you get even better with stress, strife, difficulty, challenge, duress, whatever it is. I asked in the research, where do we see this in the natural world? We see it all over. So your muscles in the gym, you will get little micro tears. Those muscles will actually heal, and those micro tears will actually create a circumstance where you are you're not only stronger, more capable of exerting torque, but in less space. So the muscles get tighter and smaller, and with less calories, they get much more efficient. That is anti-fragility. There's an example in the Marvel universe of Hulk, who ends up, he gets angrier, bigger, more aggressive, more successful, more super powered as people are aggressive towards him, as he gets increasingly abused. So that is that Hulk, he's actually anti-fragile. This is true also of the grapes and the vines in the multiple channel region. It's true in Greek mythology with the Hydra. If you cut off one head of the Hydra, it's mythicized that the Hydra then grows two heads. So that would therefore be an anti-fragile, ameliorating animal. The more duress it experiences, the better it gets. So there's examples in nature and in the natural world. There's also examples in neuroscience where what we see is that when you go through stress, strife, difficulty, challenge, actually there's a circumstance that is not post-traumatic stress or post-traumatic stress disorder. There's actually something much more common, we don't focus on, don't talk about, called post-traumatic growth. And that's actually when you increase your neuroplastic change, we increase your neural network complexity, we increase how well your brain's actually working when you've gone through difficult things, okay? And so then the question becomes, well, what are the difficult things that we can do that will help our brains be more neuroplastic? In my book, I actually have about 20 different things you can do, and in them, tons of little tactics. So real tangible things you can do every day to instill in yourself an anti-fragile mindset. But I'm going to give you 5 today. The first is that you would adopt, per Taleb, a little bit of risk. Okay, so you would loosen your grip on control and on rules and order and process. And instead, you would take on a little bit of risk. You would accept a little bit of randomness. You would be a little more spontaneous in your day. And when you allow a little bit more of that improvisation, a little bit of risk, you are implicitly acknowledging that the whole world is not predictable. And so you have less expectancy violations associated with that. When things don't go your way, you think, yeah, I know. The world's a kind of random place. And so the more that you adopt a little bit of risk and a little bit of randomness and a little bit of spontaneity, you get better at adopting more of it, more risk, more spontaneity. And so then when the world comes at you with unpredictable things, you are better at dealing with it because you are not so stuck on rules and order and structure and predictability. You understand the world doesn't quite work like that. There's another thing you can do. That is to challenge yourself so immensely that you think you might fail. Okay. And I often say that you're striving for one failure every day, a little bit, not big failure, not one that's going to hurt your health or your wealth or your well-being or your reputation, but something that you would fail at every day that would inoculate you against failures that are big, that might take over, that might happen to you instead of something that you adopted and took on yourself. This is sometimes referred to as micro-dosing failure, but it's effectively an inoculation effect, like taking your own little vaccine against failure. Every day, if you would fail a little bit, you do something you're not sure you're going to succeed at, what you will find is that you are not only more capable of taking on bigger failures and succeeding. What's interesting is it's not important that you failed in that little way every day. It's important that you witnessed yourself doing it. When you witness yourself doing it, you understand how you cope with failure. You're developing the coping skills, strategies, the cognitive schema, the schemata for how you fail. So that when big challenges come your way, you are able to say, you know what? I'm not so worried about failing. I'm not so worried about what that's going to mean for me. I know how I fail. I know how to cope. And so when big things come along, you've learned how you fail. Here again, not important that you failed. It's not detrimental. It's important that you learned how to fail because, of course, you have to fail in order to succeed. The next one is to face daily rejection. It sounds crazy, but basically what I'm asking is that every day you would do something that you don't think they're going to say yes to. Now, we also know that if you don't ask, you don't get. So it's very helpful if you can face a little bit of rejection every day. But what I'm asking is that in every way, in a way that, again, won't be detrimental to your health, your wealth, your reputation, your longevity, if what you can do is ask yourself even, what's the worst that can happen? If the worst that can happen is that you get a no, you should try more often. You do not get if you do not ask. If you ask, you shall receive. And what is great is that rejection, here again, just like failure, you get inoculated against it. So what happens is that you learn not just that you got rejected, but how you deal with rejection. You develop the coping skills, the cognitive schema, the schemata. These are important factors for how when the big rejections come, you can cope and manage. A lot of people will shortchange themselves, will not ask for things, will not go for big challenges, will not, go for the stuff that they really want in life. They'll hold themselves back because they're afraid. They fear rejection. And so if you could inoculate yourself against rejection with little rejections every day, you will be very pleasantly surprised with the results. You might also surprise yourself with what you end up actually getting. You ask and people give. It's amazing. So do face a little bit of rejection every day. Don't eschew rejection at all costs. It does not serve you. Next, one of my 20 or so pieces of insight is that in order to increase that neuroplasticity, that allostasis, the antifragility, worry less about the outcomes and fall in love with the process. Why? A lot of people will really think that the means justify the ends or the ends justify the means. And it's the idea that they get really stuck in with the process because they don't care, they don't love it, they're not in love with it. They just want whatever the dangling carrot is. They want the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. They want whatever the result will be, but they don't care how they get there. That is a mistake from a neurocognitive perspective. When you fall in love with the process, you become a lot more, first of all, you're going to get the ends much faster and much more fully than you realize. You'll likely put a lot more quality work into things. You'll enjoy your life more. You're just going to have less stress. You're also going to be a lot better at things. You're going to be a lot more likely to be curious, to experiment, to try different stuff. You are just going to have better days. The truth is we're very rarely in life standing at the finish line. We are mostly going through the process, and to go through the motions and not enjoy it is to not enjoy your life. So thinking about how you can fall in love with the process, worry less about the outcomes. The outcomes will then work themselves out. Okay. So falling in love with the process, really important. And then finally, really leaning into change we've shown accelerates the rate of neuroplastic change in your brain. It increases what we call cognitive flexibility and cognitive adaptability. And these things are so great for maintaining how plastic your brain is, for how youthful your brain is, for how happy you are, of course. And so all you have to do is say, every time you come into change or change happens to you, or maybe you even adopt something on purpose that is new or novel or different so that you can accommodate change. This actually helps you neuroplastically. It helps you be more cognitively nimble, which helps you feel more mentally well, right? Because you're just less stressed. You're not trying to control everything or eschew change and newness and novelty at all costs. So this will really help you, is to lean right into change. We've also shown that cognitive adaptability, flexibility, nimbleness actually increases vocational success. So basically, in people who are a little bit more cognitively nimble, they're more likely to take on different challenges. They're more likely to think to themselves, yeah, I can learn, I can grow, I can do. They don't give up early, and they succeed more, of course, in life and definitely at work. And so these are my 5 for the day. I have 20 more or so in the book, but it's the idea that you want to embrace some risk, randomness, be spontaneous, challenge yourself and microdose that failure, inoculate yourself against rejection. If you do not ask, you do not get, you will pleasantly surprise yourself. Fall in love with the process. You will be much more happy in life. Have a loose grip on the outcomes. They will sort themselves out. Embrace change, novelty, and newness. It will increase your cognitive flexibility, adaptiveness, and your neuroplastic change ability. This, my friends, is the Merit Framework for you in a nutshell, in a very short period of time. I want to thank you so much for having me today, to Teresa for the lovely intro, to NSB for having me. This, of course, is how you can find me. We will, of course, send this out. And then this is the link for my speaker profile. I want to thank you all again for being here. And I think now I can throw it back to Teresa for some questions. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brynn. Yes,
Thank
I love
you.
seeing the chatter about the microdosing failure. Really,
Oh, yeah, good.
people, and just an opportunity to push ourselves a little further. I'll go into some of the questions and want to respect everyone's time too. Lana's got a question about the growth mindset versus anti-fragility mindset, and says, can you talk a bit more about how the growth mindset isn't actually growth? She's curious about the anti-fragility mindset reference.
Yeah, I think growth is, but it is the circumstance where, when it's described, when you look at how Carol Dweck did it, and what really is involved in what also Taleb, same guy who came up with the concept of anti-fragility, he calls that growth, resiliency, he calls that robust. And what it is robust. It's great. It's base case. It's where most of us sit, right? Most of us are in that space. The idea is, though, that what you wouldn't do is hope to just stay in a homeostatic space. So you wouldn't hope to just be, open to feedback. Like if you go back and read what growth mindset includes, you're all of those things plus. And so, you are actively seeking rejection. You are actively seeking failure. You are actively seeking challenge so hard you're not sure you're going to succeed. In little tiny ways, not in ways that would be detrimental to your career, your reputation, your life, your health, but in little tiny ways that then help you create the mental frameworks, the coping skills for how it is that you can then take on bigger challenges when they arise, or, produce bigger challenges for yourself. We know that people who do hard things can do much more hard things, bigger, harder things. The other piece about anti-fragility that's different than growth, it includes this construct and concept of risk and randomness, the idea that you would loosen your grip on control and on, real order and process, and this complete fallacy that life is a predictable thing, that actions always beget consequences. That's not true. Those relationships we know to be very false, especially the last 5 years, if we haven't learned anything. It's that many things will defy our expectations. And so it's about accepting that. It's about saying, I accept then. And if you're really interested in more, I do encourage you to read the book, because I have tons more sort of examples of where growth leaves off and anti-fragility takes over. I also recommend Taleb's work if you're interested. He didn't talk about like human performance. He talks about organizations, day traders, trading, a different context, but yeah, very interesting philosophical construct. Yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you, Brynn. And we have another question about actually two similar questions. So this is everyone's on the same path. Laura and another attendee are asking about structuring your workday. So specifically, any advice on how to structure your workday to maximize productivity, working with our brains, shorter focus time, that sort of thing. So
such a great question. Thank you for those who asked. Yes, I sometimes show a different graph that shows you where actually the Ultradian cycle is not the same cycle over cycle. It changes throughout the day. Your best moments of the day are likely about 45 to an hour after you've woken up. And so that's typically about 8 o'clock in the morning for most people. Again, some people are morning people, some people night hawks. Let's say it's 8 o'clock. You also have a circadian peak somewhere around 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. That's typically what we consider the nighttime second wind. There's a low that happens at about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So my joke about all that, why I tell you this, is because, and you know this all implicitly and intuitively, right? Like your best neurochemical, freshest brain early in the morning. Yeah, sometimes you get the second wind, and boy, at 2:30 in the afternoon, would you love a nap? And this is also these compounding effects of circadian and ultradian cycling. But what it means is that you should consider your best work happens in the morning, or your most important work. Okay, so your highest priorities happen in the morning. And actually, the joke about it is that it's probably not throughout the 9 to 5. So it's probably not happening while you're physically at work or in the normative working hours. And so what that means then is that you would probably shift your priorities. So not email, not meetings, not dealing with other people in the first of the day. And preferably in my world, like if my ideal circumstance for you is when we're not even doing that until the afternoon. So emails, I call them the 4 M's. They're in the conclusion of the book, but email administration, moving, like there's lots of things you should be doing in the afternoon, but not in the morning. So organizing your mornings a little more strategically. Second about all that is that your brain is just not able to focus, especially as the day wears on, the way you would hope it would. So instead, what I would hope is that you organize your day in shorter sprints, not a marathon. Okay. So in like 1 hour blocks would be ideal. In the morning, if you could get away with it, cheat it a little. Maybe you have a little bit longer. Maybe you do try for those 90 minutes. Here's the thing. What you may find is that actually burns you out faster and is unsustainable because you really didn't have successive 90 minutes to focus continually, even throughout the morning. So start with 1 hour blocks where you're doing 45 minutes of work followed by 15 minutes of rest. No less than 15 minutes. Your neurochemistry can't replenish that fast. And no more than 20, because then there's this whole code switching thing that happens. You lost the plot on what you were working on. So what I would say is 1 hour blocks, 45 of work, 15 of breaks, and be really regimented with that and see if that doesn't increase your productivity. And there again, the first of the day is the most important. So instead of spending your best brain on the treadmill, maybe start with your highest priority actual knowledge work, if that's what you do, like I do, like Teresa does. And then what you'll be able to do is some of the other stuff later in the day when your cognitive capacity has waned, but you're still like awake, you're still capable of doing work. Great question.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Brynn. I'm going to jump to our book draw here now. So let me see if I can share my screen. We have got everyone who RSVP'd here on our screen, and I will do the draw. Let's see. This is for a copy. Ensure you get a copy of your book. And as I mentioned off the top, I know Brynn is so generous. We've worked out a special offer for bringing Brynn into your organization, including a number of books to help your team have the longevity of her work. And we'll be happy to share more information about that in our follow-ups. Just mention this webinar or NSB 50. And we'll be sure to share some of that specific info with you. Thank you, Brynn, for this journey through peak performance in our brain and helping us to optimize 2025. Love seeing all the chat comments here about such a great topic. Love the content, and we'll be sure to share those with you too, Brynn. So
thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you for having me. Thanks. Here's to a great kickoff to the new year and taking into account how to optimize our working brain. Thanks, Brynn.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks.